So just in terms of, I guess, to set the scene before our upcoming selling season for this year, it's interesting to just take a look at some of the figures around the industry at the moment. So this slide here, it demonstrates that it really is a great time to be part of the Australian red meat industry, and the current market and the weathering indicators, as I'll touch on in a minute, are both very, very positive. So this slide here is the red meat export value across the different species, so beef and veal, lamb, mutton, goat, and in combination. And you can see that there over the last couple of years, certainly seeing an increase, particularly from 2018 through to 2020, which of course is interesting because that was overlaid by some of the worst environmental conditions in the last drought as well. This slide here is the heavy lamb indicator. It also indicates through the right axis there the number of heads, so you can see the size of the flock at the moment, but also looking at the prices, which you can see certainly from last year have been increased, but you do see fluctuations in those prices, but certainly enjoying quite good conditions at the moment. And the other key indicator that we often refer to for the industry is the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, and that's here on the slide at the moment. And again, you can see upward trends, and it's currently at record levels. And you can see that depending on the type of buyer, so restockers, feeders, and processors, just on the graph there. And that's been increasing certainly over the last couple of years. From January 2020 has been a significant increase, and then increasing further since then. So what are some of the, I guess, the key takeaways or the key indicators and trends that we're seeing at the moment within the livestock market? Well, producer confidence is certainly very high, given both a positive weather outlook, back-to-back good seasons, and an increase in international demand. And I don't know about where some of our listeners are on the call from tonight, but certainly here in Yass in southern New South Wales at the moment, it's great if you're a duck, but setting up for certainly for a good spring at the moment with conditions the way they are. Despite lower export volumes, particularly for beef, higher prices are holding up value across the industry, and that's the total export value at the moment. Prices are expected to remain at historically high levels. Lamb production is certainly solid, with more to come, with very strong US and China demand at the moment. Mutton prices are nearing record highs. Domestic cattle market, as you would have seen in the media, is certainly at the highest point ever. And Australia continues to outpace other key exporters on price, despite those global prices lifting across the board. And just to note there that global beef trading, the dynamic is evolving at the moment, and needs to be monitored closely across the board. And there's lots more information, and we'll provide a link to that in the post-webinar email, but you can, there's heaps of information around markets available on the MLA website in particular. let's get stuck into LPA national vendor decks and what do producers need to do. So firstly, you need to maintain your LPA accreditation to continue to access LPA national vendor declarations. Need to make a very important mental note that NVDs are a legal document and they are your declaration that you have met the requirements of the LPA program, that you've managed your livestock and your property in accordance with those 7 requirements. This declaration is then married to the livestock's lifetime traceability when the transfer is completed on the NLIS database. Now, on-farm assurance and traceability need to go hand in hand so that our customers can remain confident in our integrity system and in Australian red meat. When you tick boxes on the LPA NVD or you sign the NVD, you are declaring that your on-farm practices meet those LPA requirements and therefore our customer expectations. A tick on an NVD must be backed up by accurate farm records. This is your pledge that the meat from your farm has been produced safely, ethically, and meets biosecurity requirements. And it also means that you stand by what you sell. NVDs must be provided to the transporter when selling livestock, and you need to file your completed NVDs in case of an audit. And NLIS transfers are also part of LPA audits. Now, the biggest tip to stand by what you sell is to fill in every LPA NVD correctly. The aim is to make sure that every NVD is clear, complete, and correct. Now, the questions in Part A of the National Vendor Deck are often where producers need a bit of a hand. These questions are about the animal's history. This information is crucial for food safety and market access, so the key here is to stay on the safe side. If in doubt, tick yes and check your records to be sure. Now, that's apart from the question about livestock ownership. If you bred the livestock, tick yes. If you purchased one or more animals in the consignment, then you need to tick no and indicate the most recent date of purchase. Now, some other things to note, sometimes the consignee and the destination may be different and have different property identification codes, and it's important that you identify this on the LPA NBD. In the consigned to section, you must record the full name and address of the person and or company that the livestock are being consigned to. In some instances, the address given in the consigned to section may be different to the actual physical location that the livestock are being sent to. So a really good example there is when transporting livestock to be sold at a sale yard, the consignee is your livestock agent and the destination is the sale yard location. Other things, keep an eye on accidental exposure to restricted animal materials such as pet, sheep or goats accessing dog food or pigs accessing chook scraps and things like that. But ISC, we have lots of tips on filling in the NVD so it's clear, complete and correct, and we'll definitely share those with you in the post-webinar email. The final step for Part A in the National Vendor Deck is the declaration. When you tick the box on your LPA NVD and you sign the NVD, you're guaranteeing that your on-farm practices meet LPA requirements and ultimately our customer expectations. Your tick must be backed up by accurate farm records, and just a reminder that those farm records and your NVDs, should you be asked to go through an LPA audit, will be checked as well. So we quite often get asked what are some of the top compliance issues that we see in terms of national vendor decks and when they're actually wrong or when they're not clear, complete and correct. So some examples here on the slide at the moment when we see handwritten NVDs where the handwriting is not legible or you can't read it, where the NVDs are not completed, so questions might be missed, NVDs are not signed, NVDs have both yes and no ticked to the same question instead of either one or the other. Another example is where the NVD form has been photocopied from either a hard copy book or a sample NVD downloaded from the internet. And then another classic, use of whiteout to correct a mistake on the form or crossing out a serial number, things like that. So if mistakes are made, you need to start the form again. Now, we've talked a little bit tonight. We also have access, or you can complete your national vendor declarations using the ENVD. Now, the ENVD is not just a national vendor deck. It's a system for completing all consignment paperwork digitally, including livestock assurance and health declarations. Now, there are several benefits for using the ENVD, and they include answering questions only the once, the ability to copy information to multiple forms, such as NFAS or the MSA forms. You can use templates to save even more time. The ENVD is mobile friendly. It's optimized for mobiles and will continue to improve. And it is securely stored and always available. You won't need to wait on the paper books. You're always using the current version, and you won't have to worry about finding your handwritten records. The ENVD simplifies LPA audits. It will all be in one place and easy for the auditor to find. And the ENVD can also be printed at any time as part of filling it in. So whenever you hit submit, that form will be available for you to use. Now, in addition, users of the ENVD will receive a $30 discount on their LPA accreditation or re-accreditation fees if they choose to go digital with ENVDs and then use the ENVD system to complete all their consignment paperwork. Now, a couple of handy tips here for how to complete an ENVD. You can access the new ENVD system by logging in using the direct link there on the screen. So by logging in directly, to the LPA Service Centre. And we will provide that link in the post-webinar email, or you can simply log into your LPA account via MyMLA. Now, I did just want to show you very quickly, for those of you that aren't familiar with using the ENVD, a couple of screenshots and some examples of how to go about creating a consignment and some of the language that you'll start to see within the ENVD platform. So if you want to go and create a new consignment or a new NVD using the ENVD, you simply click the button there that says create new consignment, and then you can complete an NVD from scratch. Or alternatively, you can complete an NVD using a template. Now, templates, I can't highlight templates enough actually. So if you're selling stock to using the same agent, for example, selling them to the same sale yard or the same processing plant, quite often you can create that ENVD and then save it as a template. So then next time you'll have a lot of those details already saved within that template, and you're just adding the individual consignment details. So that'll save you a lot of time. And that's also particularly relevant to if we've got any seed stock or stud producers on the call tonight. So lots and lots of stud sales will be starting to kick off in the coming months. You can create templates and you can have a lot of details saved within your ENVD several days before the sale, for example. The next part to the ENVD is around entering the movement information details. So this is where you enter the information about where the livestock are moving from and to, and what date they are being moved. Now, as I just said with templates, for example, it's quite handy, but the movement date can be up to 28 days into the future. So you can certainly plan upcoming consignments or movements well in advance. The next part of the ENVD is around selecting the species and the livestock forms you require. So as I said before, it's not just a platform for producing a national vendor deck. You can select a number of other forms, including your MSA declarations, your health declarations, as well as the national vendor deck. Now, the consignment must contain at least an LPA national vendor deck or NVD. The other forms, however, are optional. Now, the other forms visible to you are based on your program accreditation, but if a form is not appearing which should be there, you may need to check your accreditation for that particular program, such as the MSA. Now, once these details have been entered and you've chosen the type of consignment that you are completing, you can print 3 copies and you can complete the rest at the yards if you like, but you must retain the fully completed paper copy for your records. If you choose to complete the whole ENBD online, you simply step through the livestock history, food safety, chemical treatment sections as per the hard copy NVD, and then complete from there. And the final stage of the ENBD is around completing the declaration and submitting. Now you only need to sign the form once, and the signature is applied to all the forms which have been filled out in the consignment automatically. Just to note that when you sign the ENVD, that you're declaring that your livestock are meeting those LPA requirements, same as if you were using a hard copy NVD. And after submitting and essentially printing, you can make changes to certain sections to the ENVD up to 2 days after the movement date has been entered. So for the National Livestock Identification System, what do you need to do as a producer? You need to keep your online NLIS account details up to date. You need to order and use NLIS tags or devices as identifiers for every animal on your pick. You need to record movements of livestock in the NLIS database. Now, as I said, livestock transfers between picks must be recorded by transferring the tags in the database, and the person receiving the livestock is responsible for completing the transfer. The timeframes for property to property transfers vary in terms of when it needs to be done. So it's important that you check what's required for your particular state, and that all producers need to regularly check their own records against the database to ensure that those transfers have been completed. And that's really important if you're relying on someone else to make the transfer. You just need to check that that's actually happened. It's also recommended that you do a pick reconciliation every year to ensure that the NLIS database is an accurate record of devices and livestock on your property. To ensure lifetime livestock traceability, the NLIS database will also issue automated email when differences occur. So when animals might go that they've had a tag lost or a tag that wasn't registered on your pick, it's really important that if you receive those emails that you do investigate those and notify the database of the result of those discrepancies. As I said, you must record all livestock movements onto your pick on the NLIS database to remain LPA accredited. Now, failure to complete NLIS transfers will be recorded as a non-conformance by an auditor if you are audited, and may lead to suspension of your accreditation and therefore removing access to the National Vendor Declaration. If livestock are bought, sold or moved through a sale yard, the livestock movement must be recorded by the sale yard. For private sales, so sales and movements that do not take place via a sale yard, the buyer receiver of the livestock must record the livestock movement, and the vendor or sender of the livestock is not obliged to record the movement off the property, although they might do so. But as I said, and the other instance there is that abattoirs must also record movements for all directly consigned livestock. However, as I said before, it is the responsibility of the receiver or the purchaser to make sure that that's done. And even if you're relying on a sale yard to do that, it's also good practice just to double check that that's happened. And as I said before, completing that pick reconciliation annually is recommended for all LPA accredited producers. And of course, all livestock consignments on the NLIS database must be accompanied by a form of movement documentation. Now, I've got a little integrity insight there that state legislation also requires that the buyer or receiver completes the transfer, and penalties may be imposed by the state and territory government for failing to complete those transfers as well. So we've got a bit of an integrity insight there, or some tips for actually if you are sort of checking the database or transfers and pick reconciliations, or if you need help navigating around the NLIS database, we've got a whole heap of tech tips, and we're also in the process of turning those into a series of how-to guides. So stay tuned for those. But at the moment, you can certainly access a suite of tech tips on the ISC website, and we'll provide a link to that in the post-webinar email. But a little integrity insight there. Check the NLIS database whenever transfers have been completed to ensure that the numbers are correct as well. It can save you a lot of time rather than correcting mistakes later on. Another integrity insight is around an early warning status as part of the national, the NLIS. So an early warning is a status within the NLIS database that's automatically assigned to a property carrying high-risk animals. While it doesn't identify specific animals, it does help monitor and manage biosecurity risks for your farm and food safety along the supply chain. And statuses are listed on the NLIS database. So there's more information around an early warning status for producers and also sale yards and agents available on the ISC website. And we'll provide a link to that in the post-webinar email as well. So we've covered a fair bit of territory this evening, but there's certainly plenty more information available to you, not just for preparing for the selling season coming up, whether or not you're purchasing or selling your own livestock, but any sort of engagement with the integrity system or any of the requirements. So the ISC website would be the first port of call, and also the LPA Service Centre, which has your specific information attached to your account. We also have Integrity Matters, which is our monthly email, which goes out to all LPA accredited producers, as well as several hundred other stakeholders with an interest in the integrity system. If you don't receive that, then you can shoot us an email, or you can subscribe via the website. We're across all the usual social and digital platforms as well. We have a range of tools and resources, particularly on YouTube, videos and animations that will help you use the ENVD, for example, how to complete your national vendor deck, or the LPA learning. Yeah, there's some really great resources and assets on there. And also just a little plug, we do have a number of webinars coming up as well, different topics to this evening. Next week, we're doing one for those that may not be responsible or as the landowner or the key account holder with the LPA, but they are responsible for or have a role in managing livestock. So that's a red meat integrity system overview for farm managers, overseers, farm hands or office staff. And then in August, we take a deep dive into the different elements of the livestock production assurance program. And then from the end of August onwards, we're working with the state departments to do a run through of what you need to do within the National Livestock Identification System across the different states. So lots of topics, lots of webinars coming up, and lots of really useful resources available to help you meet your requirements. And just before I do finish up and we take a couple of questions, just a little disclaimer there that in particular with the National Vendor Declaration, that it is a declaration, and it is your declaration as a producer. We at ISC can't do it for you. Your livestock agent can't do it for you, but absolutely we're here to help, and we have plenty of resources available to help you meet your requirements, not only in terms of completing the National Vendor Deck, where it all sort of comes to life, but also helping meet your requirements as part of LPA and NLIS as well. So that's it from me, Dee. We have covered a lot of ground tonight. Happy to take any questions, but thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathleen. So many great tips in that presentation. So yeah, hopefully you've got a stack of notes, everyone, and you're going to make sure that when your livestock are ready to market, you are ready to go. So a couple of things. We're just going to put a final call out for questions. Thank you to everyone who's put some really great questions in the Q&A that we've all been able to learn from this evening. So just a last call, if you've got anything else, then please make sure that you pop it in there now so we can get the team to answer it. Secondly, there is the chat box down there as well, and we've got an evaluation survey in there. If you just click on that link, it is very short, sharp and shiny. I promise. We just love your feedback on the session. And any suggestions or tips that you might have for us in terms of other sessions that we could be running out for you. Now, we've got a couple of questions that have been sent in the registration process, and we've got a couple of minutes before we finish up. So I'm just going to put those to Damon Holmes. And Damon manages the integrity program, so has that sort of oversight and overarching role over all of them. So Damon, a couple of questions. The first one is, what happens if an animal gets to a sale yard or abattoir and has lost a tag? What happens then?
Yeah, thanks, Dee. It does happen frequently, and probably more frequently than it should. I think it probably points to what Kathleen covered in her presentation. I think, if you've got good practices on farm, make sure that you're checking, devices prior to loading on the truck, for instance. But if they do, obviously, and it does happen that they fall out by transport and the like, that when they do reach sale yard or feedlot, there is a post-breeder tag generally applied to that animal, which is the orange post-breeder tag. It still is an analysed device, and ultimately it'll lose lifetime traceability. I think, as Kathleen alluded to, there's fees associated with that, and each of those supply chain partners may charge a different fee. So I certainly encourage checking those animals prior to loading and sending off to market.
Okay. A similar question. So if your LPA accreditation has lapsed and perhaps you didn't realise, what happens when those animals do get to a sale yard or an abattoir, even if you had sent an NVD with the animals? Yeah,
it's a process that each of the supply chain partners, so you're sending to a sale yard, feedlot, or processor, they actually check in the NLIS database to see if you're LPA accredited. So the challenge here is if you're using hard copy NVDs and you're under the illusion that you're still accredited, what we do is through the re-accreditation process, reach out to producers to ensure that they know it's lapsing. So the key here is, first of all, just make sure your information's up to date online, and which, as Kathleen talked about tonight, through my MLA, make sure your information's clear and correct. So we can contact you to let you know. But if, for instance, it doesn't, then those animals will not be sold under LPA accreditation. So they could potentially be sold for a lesser value within the market. And obviously the market will dictate what you get on the day. So ultimately they'll be either turned away or sold at a lesser value.
Yeah, okay, excellent. And also, I mean, this does happen. So if you're ready to sell and you haven't ordered a book, one of the LPA NVD books, what does ISC recommend in that situation if you need an NVD in a hurry?
Yes, obviously the eNVD is the quick and easy solution. So if you're LPA accredited, anyone's got access. It's free. So if you're stuck in a tight spot and you're running out of pages, you can easily jump online, access those at any time, 24/7.
Excellent, great, thanks, Damon. And we did have quite a number of eNVD questions tonight. So make sure when you get that post-webinar email, there'll be a link to a really great resource in there, an animation that ISC has put together. But earlier this month, we also had a very more of an in-depth session around the eNVD. So we'll include a link to that session as well in the post-webinar email. So if you want to have a look at a bit of a deep dive around that, then there'll be plenty of information to help you. Now, Kathleen, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I can see that Callum is just finishing off one of the questions in the Q&A. So we might finish off with the last question to you, if that's all right, Kathleen. So if you might be a small landholder with a small number of animals, and I think sometimes there's a bit of confusion around whether all of this kind of applies to you. Can you just set the record straight that if you are a small producer and you do have a small number of animals that you might be selling, what should they be doing in this situation?
Thanks, Dee. So yes, we quite often receive this question, and yes, the integrity system does apply to small landholders. So regardless of the number of animals or the size of your property, if you have sheep, cattle or goats, and then you are required to comply with the integrity system, and that of course becomes particularly relevant when those animals need to move. So if you're moving them between properties, so those properties might be a small land holding, and that would still have a property identification code or would need one. And certainly if they're being sold by a sale yard, you would absolutely need to complete a national vendor deck and record those movements on the NLIS database. So that does apply to animals that are pets or were pets. Yeah, so absolutely, if you're if you're a livestock producer, you do sign up to complying with the requirements outlined as part of the integrity system. Now, having said that, we do have plenty of resources available. We recognise that small producers may not be interacting or selling animals very often, so there is plenty of help available. And the ISC website's the best place to start. There'll be lots of links and things available tonight. You can also work with your farm supply staff or your agent, and certainly you can also contact the ISC customer service team as well, who are more than happy to help outline what those requirements are. But the key thing is that, yeah, certainly livestock, regardless of what you use them for, they are in the food chain, and we need to make sure that we're assuring potential customers of the food safety and traceability of those animals.